The rain was relentless, pounding the stone steps of our Richmond mansion like it wanted to wash away every lie my family built. I'm Emily Carter, and this is the night they broke me, or tried to. My grandfather, Henry Carter, left me everything: his company, his estate, $15 million. He saw me when no one else did, called me his strategist, his legacy. But my parents, James and Margaret, had other plans. They wanted it all for my sister, Sophia, their golden child who sparkled without effort. That night, I stood in the foyer, clutching my suitcase, ready to leave with what was rightfully mine. Then my father's voice cut through the air: "You're not taking a dime." My mother screamed followed, "Ungrateful leech." Before I could move, James grabbed my hair, yanking me backward. My heels scraped the marble as he dragged me toward the door. Sophia watched, smirking, her silence louder than the storm outside. They didn't just want the money, they wanted me erased. The door swung open, and I was shoved into the rain. My suitcase hit the ground, bursting open, my clothes soaking in the mud. Margaret stood tall, her eyes cold as she said, "You're done here." But they underestimated me. As I fell, I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I locked eyes with them and whispered, "You'll regret this." Not for the money, but because I'd fight. In that moment, soaked and bruised, I felt Henry's strength in me. He'd taught me to sail through storms, to hold the wheel when waves crashed. Now, I'd navigate this betrayal. I clutched his gold pocket watch, the one thing they couldn't take. It was more than a keepsake, it was a promise. As I stumbled into the dark, I wasn't running away. I was running toward something: the truth, the fight, the legacy Henry entrusted to me. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. My family thought they'd won, but they didn't know what I'd find in that watch, or the fire they'd ignited. I'd come back, not just for what was mine, but to show them who I really am. The rain from that night still lingers in my mind, but to understand why my family betrayed me, I need to take you back, to the years when I was just Emily Carter, a girl trying to find her place in a house that never felt like home. Our Richmond mansion was grand, all marble and chandeliers, but it was cold, like my parents' eyes whenever I walked into a room. I grew up in the shadow of my sister, Sophia, their perfect star. She was the one they paraded at galas, her laughter filling the halls while I faded into the background. My mother, Margaret, called her our jewel, her voice dripping with pride at every charity event. My father, James, would nod, his attention glued to Sophia's every move. Me? I was the afterthought, the one they barely noticed. But there was one person who saw me, my grandfather, Henry Carter. He was a titan, built an empire with Carter Holdings, but to me, he was just Grandpa, with his leather chairs and a smile that warmed the east wing of our estate. "There's my strategist," he'd say, pulling me into his study. While Sophia got cars and applause, I got something better: Henry's time. He taught me to sail on his yacht, Starlight, out on the Chesapeake Bay. "The sea doesn't care about your name, Emily," he'd say, handing me the wheel. "It respects competence." I learned to read the wind, to tack against the waves, to hold steady when the world rocked beneath me. Those days on the water weren't just lessons in sailing, they were lessons in surviving. At home, the contrast was stark. Sophia's 16th birthday was a spectacle. They gave her a convertible, white with a red bow, and the socialites clapped like she'd won an Oscar. I stood in the back, holding a plastic cake knife, ignored. A week later, she crashed that car into a lamppost. My parents blamed the city's lights, never her. That same year, I got straight A's and a prepaid gift card. $50. Margaret would say, "Sophia's our star," loud enough for everyone to hear, as if I'd agreed. When Sophia failed biology, they hired a tutor who cost more than my school's teachers earned in a month. When I won first in a statewide math contest, James glanced at his phone and mumbled, "Is that the one with numbers?" They didn't hate me, they just didn't see me. I was a ghost in their perfect picture. Henry was different. He made me real. Saturdays were ours, spent in his office or on Starlight. He'd draw diagrams on yellow pads, explaining mergers, board votes, and ethics with the same passion he used to teach me how to anchor a boat. "You think like a builder, Emily," he told me when I was 16. "Sophia shines, but shine fades. Structure lasts." I didn't fully grasp it then, but his words stuck, like an anchor in deep water. He gave me a journal, its first page inscribed, "Hold fast, my captain." That journal became my lifeline, a reminder I was more than the shadow my family cast. The tension started when Henry got sick. His study, once alive with our talks, grew quiet. I'd sit by his bed, reading him market reports, pretending everything was fine. He'd squeeze my hand and say, "You're ready, Emily." Ready for what? I didn't know, not until the day he called me to his side, his voice steady despite the pain. "I'm leaving it all to you," he said. "The company, the estate, the 15 million. You're the one I trust." My heart raced. I wanted to protest, to say it was too much, but his eyes held mine, unwavering. He knew what was coming. After he passed, the air in the mansion changed. Margaret's smiles turned sharp, James's silence heavy. At the will reading, the lawyer's voice cut through the walnut-paneled room. "To my granddaughter, Emily Carter, I leave my controlling shares in Carter Holdings, the Richmond estate, and all personal possessions therein." Silence exploded. Margaret's glass trembled in her hand. James blinked, recalculating his world. Sophia let out a choked laugh. 15 million? That's it for me? She got a trust, 2 million spread over 10 years. Pocket change to her. Margaret stood, insisting it was a mistake, that Henry wasn't in his right mind. I spoke softly, "He was. You just didn't listen." They didn't argue, they just looked through me, like I was already gone. That night, I passed James's study and heard whispers. "She manipulated him," Margaret hissed. "All those hours in his office, scheming." James replied, "We'll challenge it. There's time." I walked away, my hands shaking, and opened Henry's journal. His words stared back, "Hold fast, my captain." I didn't know then how far they'd go, but I felt the storm brewing. The mansion wasn't a home anymore, it was a battlefield. And I was about to learn what it meant to fight for what was mine. The whispers I overheard in my father's study that night were just the beginning, like the first ripples before a tsunami. The Richmond mansion, once my home, had become a maze of deceit, and I, Emily Carter, was its target. After my grandfather Henry's death, the air shifted. The warmth of his east wing faded, replaced by a chill that followed me everywhere. My family, my parents, James and Margaret, and my sister, Sophia, weren't just grieving. They were plotting. Henry's will left me $15 million, Carter Holdings, and the estate, but they wanted it for Sophia, their star. I thought I could hold my ground, cling to Henry's words in my journal, "Hold fast, my captain," but I didn't yet know how far they'd go to erase me. It started small, almost unnoticeable. A hallway light, always on, was suddenly off, casting shadows where I walked. The staff, once friendly, avoided my eyes, their smiles stiff. I caught my mother's perfume lingering in Henry's east wing, a place she never visited when he was alive. Then came the first real blow. The code to my office, Henry's old space where we'd mapped out strategies, was changed. I punched in the numbers, my fingers steady, but the lock blinked red. I asked Clara, our loyal housekeeper, if she knew why. Her voice was low, her eyes darting. "Your father ordered extra security, Miss Emily." "Security? Or a cage?" My laptop was next. My password failed twice, each error tightening my chest. When it finally unlocked, folders were gone, Henry's files labeled transition planning and board contingencies, the blueprints of his legacy. I checked the trash bin. Empty. The hard drive log showed a login from our lawyer, Thomas Reed, but no timestamp. My stomach churned. These weren't accidents. They were moves in a game I hadn't agreed to play. Over dinner, I confronted James, keeping my voice calm. "Files are missing from my laptop." He sliced his steak with surgical precision, not looking up. This stress isn't good for you, Emily. Maybe see Dr. Mendelsohn. Your mother found him helpful. Margaret stirred her soup, her smile thin. Grief can make you see things, dear. I wasn't imagining it, but their words twisted my reality, making me question my own mind. The mansion grew hostile. Henry's ledger, always pristine, appeared on the kitchen counter, pages torn, ink smudged. I asked the new maid if she'd seen anyone touch it. She mumbled an excuse, her gaze fixed on the floor. At night, footsteps echoed outside my bedroom, slow and deliberate, too heavy for staff. I'd fling open the door, heart pounding, but the hallway was always empty. I started locking my door, but soon noticed scratches on the lock, faint but real, like someone had tested it. Fear crept in, but I pushed it down. Henry taught me to face storms, not hide from them. Then came the night I caught Sophia. I was passing Henry's study, the door ajar, when I saw her silhouette rifling through his desk. Papers rustled, a drawer clicked shut. I stepped inside, my voice sharp. "What are you doing?" She froze, then turned, her smirk cutting through the dark. "Nothing you'd understand, little sister. You're nothing without Grandpa's money." In her hand was a folder, one of Henry's, marked Board Ethics. I lunged for it, but she slipped past, laughing. "Run to mommy if you want, but you're out of your league." Her words stung, but they woke me up. This wasn't just about money, it was about power, and they thought I had none. I confided in Clara the next day, my voice barely above a whisper. "They're taking everything, aren't they?" Her eyes softened, but her words were urgent. "Miss Emily, you need to leave. It's not safe here anymore." Leave? This was my home, Henry's legacy. But Clara's warning echoed Henry's lessons: sometimes, you tack against the wind to survive. I started checking my room daily, noticing small things, a moved book, a drawer slightly open. Then I found it, an envelope on my pillow, unmarked. Inside was a single page, a prescription note dated months before Henry's death, claiming he had mental fatigue. At the bottom, in unfamiliar handwriting, someone had underlined "monitor for signs of undue influence." It wasn't his doctor's script. It was a lie, crafted to paint Henry as unstable and me as a manipulator. My hands shook as I sat on my bed, clutching Henry's journal. His words stared back: "Hold fast, my captain." This was no longer a suspicion, it was war. They were building a case, not just to take the money, but to destroy my credibility, my connection to Henry. I thought of the sea, how Henry taught me to watch for signs of a squall. The signs were everywhere now: the changed codes, the missing files, the forged note. My family wasn't just stealing, they were rewriting history. Margaret's late-night visits to the East Wing, James's calm denials, Sophia's theft, they were pieces of a puzzle I was only starting to see. I didn't sleep that night. I paced, replaying every moment since Henry's death. The mansion, once a sanctuary, was closing in, its walls whispering betrayal. But I wasn't helpless. Henry had prepared me, not just with his lessons, but with his trust. I thought of Starlight, how he'd say, "The sea tests you, Emily, but it also shows you who you are." This was my test. I didn't know what they'd do next, but I knew I couldn't stay still. The envelope on my pillow wasn't just a threat, it was a challenge. And I was ready to answer it, not with tears or pleas, but with the strength Henry saw in me. The storm was here, and I'd sail through it, no matter the cost. The envelope on my pillow was a warning, a declaration of war from a family I once called mine. I'm Emily Carter, and by the time the sun rose over our Richmond mansion, I knew the battlefield was set. The whispers, the missing files, Sophia's theft in Henry's study, they weren't just moves to steal my $15 million inheritance. They were steps to erase me, to rewrite my grandfather's trust in me as madness. Henry's words in my journal, "Hold fast, my captain," burned in my mind, but the storm I'd sensed was no longer coming. It was here, and it was about to break me. It started with a call over the intercom, Clara's voice clipped and formal. like she'd been coached. Family meeting, dining room. Now. My stomach twisted. This wasn't a meeting, it was an ambush. I walked down the grand staircase, my footsteps echoing in the silence, each one heavier than the last. The dining room was a stage, and my family was ready to perform. Margaret sat at the head of the table, her pearls glinting like armor, her face a mask of false sympathy. James stood beside her, his posture rigid, no trace of the father I once knew. Sophia lounged by the window, scrolling her phone, her indifference sharper than any knife. Thomas Reed, our lawyer, was there too, his briefcase closed, his notepad blank, a prop in their charade. James spoke first, his voice cold as steel. "We filed a stay on the transfer of assets. Given concerns about Henry's health, its best control remains with us for now." My chest tightened. Concerns? They meant the forged note, the lie about Henry's mental state. I forced my voice steady. "What about the court?" Margaret's smile was venom. "They're sympathetic to our concerns." Sympathetic to their lies, she meant. Thomas chimed in, his tone soft but poisonous. "It's no longer appropriate for you to stay in the house." The words landed like a punch. "You're kicking me out?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. James didn't hesitate. "You're free to go anywhere you like. You have until this afternoon." I turned to leave, my mind racing, but Margaret's voice stopped me. "You're not taking anything that doesn't belong to you." I faced her, gripping my journal, Henry's gift. "These are my clothes, my things." Her eyes narrowed. "Everything in this house is contested." I kept moving, heading upstairs to pack, my hands shaking but deliberate. I grabbed essentials, clothes, my phone, Henry's journal, his gold pocket watch. But as I zipped my suitcase, Margaret appeared in my doorway, her presence like a storm cloud. "I said nothing leaves this house." I ignored her, slinging the bag over my shoulder. She called for James. He didn't argue. He didn't warn. His hand shot out, seizing my hair, his grip so tight my scalp burned. I gasped, my journal slipping from my hand. He yanked me backward, dragging me across the floor, my shoulders slamming into the hardwood. The journal hit the ground, and James's foot caught it, tearing pages loose. Henry's words, my lifeline, scattered like leaves in the wind. I clawed at his arm, but he was relentless, pulling me down the stairs, each step a jolt of pain. My knee scraped the marble, my breath ragged, but I didn't scream. I wouldn't give them that. Sophia stood at the base of the stairs, her eyes locked on mine, whispering, "You deserve this." Her words cut deeper than the bruises forming on my skin. Margaret opened the front door, the rain roaring outside like an angry sea. James shoved me forward, and I stumbled onto the stone steps, the cold water soaking through my clothes. My suitcase followed, thrown with such force it burst open, spilling my belongings into the mud, sweaters, papers, Henry's watch. I scrambled to my knees, gathering what I could, my hands trembling. James adjusted his jacket, his voice calm. "You're no longer welcome here." Margaret crossed her arms, her silhouette framed by the warm light of the mansion. "Come back, and it's trespassing." Sophia leaned against the doorway, her smirk a silent victory. I stood, water streaming down my face, my scalp throbbing, my pride intact. A neighbor's shadow flickered across the street, watching, a witness to their cruelty. I clutched Henry's watch, its weight grounding me. My voice was clear, cutting through the storm. "You'll regret this. Not because of the money, but because you think I won't fight." James's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Margaret's eyes flickered, a crack in her facade. Sophia's smirk faltered, just for a moment. They thought they'd won, that I was broken, cast out like driftwood. But they didn't know me. They didn't know Henry's lessons, the strength he'd built in me on starlight, steering through waves that threatened to swallow us. As I turned to walk away, the rain didn't feel cold anymore. It felt alive, like it was washing away their lies, their grip on me. I wasn't just leaving the mansion, I was stepping into a fight I was born to win. Henry taught me to read the wind, to hold the wheel when the world tilted. This was my storm, and I'd navigate it. My family thought they'd stripped me bare, but they'd only freed me. I had Henry's watch, his journal, torn but not destroyed, and a fire they couldn't extinguish. Somewhere in the distance, a car pulled up, its headlights cutting through the dark. It was Lily, my friend, my lifeline. She didn't need to ask what happened. She just opened the door, and I stepped inside, not as a victim, but as a survivor, ready to reclaim what was mine. The rain didn't stop as I stepped into Lily's car, my clothes soaked, my body bruised, but my spirit unbroken. I'm Emily Carter, and that night, cast out from the Richmond mansion, I carried more than pain. I held my grandfather Henry's gold pocket watch, the one thing my family couldn't strip from me. They thought they'd won, that by dragging me down those stairs and throwing me into the storm, they'd erased my claim to the $15 million inheritance Henry entrusted to me. But they didn't know what I'd find in that watch, or the fire they'd ignited. Henry taught me to sail through storms, and this was no different. I wasn't defeated, I was just beginning. Lily drove in silence, her hands steady on the wheel, her apartment a safe harbor in the chaos. Curled on her couch under a borrowed blanket, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed the betrayal, James's grip on my hair, Margaret's cold stare, Sophia's whispered taunt, "You deserve this." My torn journal lay beside me, Henry's words, "Hold fast, my captain," barely legible on scattered pages. But the watch, heavy in my palm, felt like more than a keepsake. Henry used to wind it every evening, saying, "A good watch doesn't just tell time, Emily. It tells you when to move." I turned it over, tracing its edges, and noticed something odd. The weight was uneven, the back panel slightly raised. My heart skipped. Henry loved secrets, codes, hidden drawers. He'd taught me 1 year ago, a rhythm to open his study safe: tap, pause, tap tap. I pressed the panel, mimicking that rhythm. A soft click echoed in the quiet room, and the back popped open. Inside was a folded note, yellowed with age, and a tiny USB drive. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper. In Henry's neat script, it read, "If they've done what I feared, go to William Harper in Charleston. He'll know what to do." H. A chill ran through me. Henry hadn't just trusted me, he'd foreseen this betrayal, planned for it. I flashed back to a day on Starlight, his yacht, when I was 16. He'd shown me a hidden safe, teaching me the code with a grin. "Trust only yourself, Emily," he'd said, his eyes serious. "Some storms come from those closest to you." I hadn't understood then, but now it was clear. He'd been preparing me. I grabbed Lily's laptop, my pulse racing, and plugged in the USB. Files loaded, scans of Henry's medical evaluations, each one affirming his mental clarity, dated up to his final weeks. No trace of the mental fatigue my family's forged note claimed. There were audio recordings too, hours of our talks in his study, my voice young but sharp, dissecting mergers, board dynamics, ethics. Henry's tone was proud, deliberate, like he knew these would be evidence. "Emily's the one I trust," he said in one clip, clear as day. My throat tightened. He hadn't just taught me, he'd documented everything, building a fortress around his legacy. Then I found the spreadsheets. Ledgers of accounts I'd never seen, some domestic, others offshore, labeled EC Emergency. EC, Emily Carter. My eyes widened. Henry had hidden funds, safeguards, knowing my family might strike. One folder stood out, CW Activity. CW, Sophia Carter. I opened it, and my breath caught. Bank records showed transfers to a shell company, Bright Ventures, linked to Sophia. Hundreds of thousands, siphoned from Carter Holdings, tied to her gambling debts, casinos in Atlantic City, Vegas, not the European trip she'd claimed. Sophia wasn't just complicit, she was a pawn in their scheme, her recklessness a liability they'd covered up. Henry had tracked it all, leaving me the map to their lies. I sat back, the weight of his foresight sinking in. Henry didn't just see me, he saw them, their greed, their betrayal. He'd built a failsafe, hidden in a watch I'd carried through the rain. Lily walked in, holding tea, her eyes soft. "Is that from your grandfather?" I nodded, my voice steady. "He didn't just trust me. He knew this was coming, and he didn't leave me defenseless." I closed the laptop, a new fire in my chest. The USB wasn't just evidence, it was a weapon, and I'd use it. I thought of that day on Starlight, Henry's hand on my shoulder as we faced rough seas. "The sea tests you, Emily, but it also shows you who you are." This was my test, and I was passing it. I booked a one-way ticket to Charleston that morning, my fingers steady on my phone. William Harper's name was on a document in the USB, marked Last Contingency. I sent him an email, short and direct. "Henry Carter said you'd know what to do. EC." 3 hours later, his reply came, "Come immediately. You're not alone." I exhaled, the first real breath I'd taken since the mansion. My family thought they'd broken me, but they'd only sharpened my edges. Henry's watch, his words, his plan, they were my anchor now. The war was coming, and I had a map to win it. Henry's watch ticked in my pocket as I boarded the bus to Charleston, its rhythm a reminder of the fight ahead. I'm Emily Carter, and after being dragged out of my family's Richmond mansion, soaked and bruised, I wasn't running away. I was running toward justice, armed with a USB drive Henry hid for me, a lifeline to reclaim the $15 million inheritance my parents, James and Margaret, stole from my sister, Sophia. His note said to find William Harper, and as the city skyline faded, I felt Henry's strength guiding me. My family thought they'd broken me, but they'd only sharpened my resolve. This wasn't just about money, it was about proving who I was, the strategist Henry trained me to be. Charleston greeted me with humid air and quiet streets, a stark contrast to the storm I'd left behind. William Harper's office was tucked in a brick building, its walls lined with books and secrets. He met me with a firm handshake, his eyes sharp but kind, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "Henry came to me after his diagnosis," he said, pulling a folder marked in my grandfather's handwriting. "He didn't trust your family, except you." My chest tightened. Henry hadn't just planned for betrayal, he'd built an army for me. William introduced Rachel Brooks, an estate litigation attorney whose calm demeanor hid a fierce edge. I explained everything, James dragging me by my hair, Sophia's smirk, the forged note claiming Henry was unfit. Rachel didn't flinch. "Do you have documentation?" she asked. I handed her the USB, my fingers steady. "Everything's here." We sat around a table, the USB's files projected on a screen. Medical records glowed, each one confirming Henry's clarity, debunking the lies my family spun. Audio clips played, my voice, Henry's, strategizing over Carter Holdings, his trust in me unmistakable. "Emily doesn't posture, she plans," he'd said, his words a shield against their accusations. Then came the ledgers, accounts Henry hid for me, labeled EC Emergency. But the real blow was Sophia's file. Bank records traced hundreds of thousands from Carter Holdings to Bright Ventures, a shell company tied to her gambling debts, Atlantic City, Vegas, not Europe as she'd lied. "She's not just complicit," Rachel said, her voice low. "She's their weak link." My sister, their star, was unraveling their scheme. William's team dug deeper, pulling emails, account logs, board minutes. A digital signature on the forged note, supposedly from Henry's doctor, was created on Thomas Reed's laptop, 2 weeks after Henry's death. The metadata was undeniable, a crack in their fortress. Rachel filed an emergency injunction to freeze the estate, her pen moving like a sword. "We're not just fighting for the money," she said. "We're fighting for Henry's truth." I nodded, feeling the weight of his legacy. He'd seen this coming, and I was his plan. That night, alone in a guest room above William's garage, I felt the fight shift. I wasn't the girl thrown into the rain anymore. I was Henry's captain, steering through the storm. My phone buzzed, Margaret, her name a jolt. Her voice was syrupy, desperate. "Emily, this is nonsense. Come home, and we'll sort it out." I pictured her pearls, her fake tears. "There's nothing to sort," I said, my voice cold. You made your choice. I hung up, her pleas cut off, and felt lighter. They weren't in control anymore. I was. The next day, I visited Starlight, Henry's yacht, docked nearby. Its deck smelled of salt and memories, days when he'd taught me to read the wind, to hold steady. Below deck, I found a hidden panel, just like the one in his watch. Inside was a letter, his handwriting unmistakable. You're my legacy, Emily. Fight. Tears stung my eyes, but they weren't from pain. They were from purpose. Henry hadn't just given me tools, he'd given me a mission. I tucked the letter into my pocket, next to his watch, and returned to William's office, my resolve ironclad. Rachel's team worked fast, cross-referencing the USB's data with company records. Every transfer to Sophia's shell company, every falsified document, was a thread pulling their lies apart. William leaned back, his voice grim. They thought they could rewrite Henry's will, but they didn't count on him outsmarting them. I thought of Henry on Starlight, his grin when we'd outrun a squall. He'd outrun my family too, leaving me the map to finish it. The injunction was just the start, a legal flare signaling their downfall. Rachel looked at me, her eyes steady. You ready for the courtroom? I nodded, my voice firm. I've been ready my whole life. As I packed for the next step, I felt Henry's presence, like a hand on my shoulder. The mansion, the money, the company, they were pieces of a larger truth. I was his choice, his strategist. My family thought they'd buried me, but they'd only planted the seeds of their defeat. The courthouse loomed ahead, a battleground where their lies would face Henry's truth. I wasn't alone anymore. With William, Rachel, and Henry's plan, I was unstoppable. The storm wasn't over, but I was no longer just surviving it, I was steering it, straight toward justice. The Charleston courthouse stood like a lighthouse in the storm I'd sailed through. I'm Emily Carter, and after being dragged out of my family's Richmond mansion, betrayed and bruised, I wasn't here to beg. I was here to win. Henry's USB, his watch, his words, "Hold fast, my captain," had led me to this moment, armed with truth against the lies my parents, James and Margaret, and my sister, Sophia, built to steal my $15 million inheritance. With William Harper and Rachel Brooks by my side, I walked into the courtroom, my pulse steady, not from calm, but from the fire Henry ignited in me. My family thought they'd buried me, but today, their house of cards would fall. The room smelled of varnish and tension, every seat filled with whispers and anticipation. I sat straight, hands folded, eyes forward, feeling Henry's presence like a hand on my shoulder. My family arrived, Margaret in navy pearls, her face a mask of practiced charm, James flanking her like a general, his jaw tight. Sophia sat behind them, eyes down, lips pressed, no trace of her usual smirk. They didn't look at me, not once, as if I were already a ghost. Rachel stood, her voice clear and unyielding, opening with Henry's will, its words etched in my heart. To my granddaughter, Emily Carter, I leave my controlling shares in Carter Holdings, the Richmond estate, and all possessions therein. The room stilled, the weight of Henry's intent undeniable. Rachel moved to the evidence, each piece a hammer striking their lies. She presented Henry's medical records, certified by his physician, proving his clarity to his final breath. No mental fatigue, no instability, only the sharp mind that chose me. Then came the forged note, the one my family used to paint Henry as unfit. Rachel displayed its metadata, created on Thomas Reed's laptop, 2 weeks after Henry's death. The judge's brow lifted, her pen pausing. Gasps rippled through the room. Thomas, their lawyer, shifted in his seat, his face paling. Rachel didn't stop. She played audio from the USB, Henry's voice, strong and deliberate, discussing Carter Holdings with me. Callista is the only one I trust with this legacy, he said, mistaking my name in his passion but not his purpose. She doesn't posture, she plans. My throat tightened, his trust a shield I carried. Then came the financial records, the ones that broke their facade. Rachel revealed transfers to Bright Ventures, Sophia's shell company, siphoning hundreds of thousands from Carter Holdings to cover her gambling debts, Atlantic City, Vegas, not the European glamour she'd claimed. Sophia's head snapped up, her face crumpling. She stood, voice trembling. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she blurted, tears streaming. "The debts." I couldn't stop. The courtroom froze. James lunged forward, hissing, "Sit down," but the judge's gavel slammed, silencing him. Sophia sank back, her confession a crack in their armor. Rachel pressed on, showing bank logs, timestamps, undeniable proof of their scheme. Clara, our housekeeper, took the stand next, her voice soft but steady. "I saw Mr. Carter drag Emily by her hair down the stairs," she said, eyes downcast. "I should have spoken sooner, but I'm here now." My chest ached, her words a quiet courage. Then a neighbor, Mrs. Ellison, testified, her voice firm. "I saw Emily thrown out that night, her suitcase in the mud. They treated her like garbage." The judge's eyes narrowed, her pen moving again. Each word tightened the noose around my family's lies, their carefully curated image shattering. The final blow was Henry's video, a file from the USB I hadn't heard until now. His face filled the screen, tired but resolute, his voice cutting through the room. "If you're watching this, they've tried to undo my choice. They may rewrite paper, but they can't rewrite my intent. Emily is my legacy." Silence fell, thick and absolute, like the air before a wave crashes. Margaret's jaw dropped, her pearls no longer a shield. James turned red, his hands clenched. Sophia stared at the floor, her defiance gone. Thomas looked like a man who'd lost a bet he couldn't afford. Judge Morales didn't hesitate. Her voice was steel as she ruled, "The will is upheld. All assets are returned to Emily Carter, sole controlling stakeholder of Carter Holdings and rightful owner of the Richmond estate." The gavel dropped, a sound like thunder. Criminal referrals followed, a warning of consequences to come. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I stood, my name echoing in the ruling, finally seen, not as a shadow, but as Henry's heir. My family sat, stunned, their empire of lies collapsed. I nodded to Rachel, to William, then walked out, the courthouse doors opening to a world where I wasn't just surviving, I was reigning. The fight wasn't over, but the tide had turned. Henry's truth had won, and I carried it forward, not just for me, but for him. The mansion, the company, the money, they were mine again, but more than that, I'd reclaimed my place. My family thought they could erase me, but they'd only made me stronger. The storm was clearing, and I was ready to sail into what came next, Henry's captain, unbowed, unbroken, unstoppable. The courthouse doors closed behind me, but the weight of victory followed me home. I'm Emily Carter, and walking back into the Richmond mansion, now mine, felt like reclaiming a piece of my soul. The halls, once suffocating, stood silent, no longer my prison. The staff's eyes darted, unsure of their place, but I didn't blame them. They were caught in my family's storm, just like me. Margaret called 3 times, her voicemails unanswered, her voice a ghost I'd left behind. James sent an email, sharp and cold, "This is beneath you." I marked it unread, his words as empty as his promises. But Sophia came to the gates, alone, no driver, just a slim box in her hands. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said, her voice small. Inside were Henry's cufflinks, gold with a sailboat etching. "Dad sold them," she admitted. "I bought them back. I didn't thank her. I didn't forgive. But I let her leave, our silence heavy with truths we couldn't speak. She'd said she couldn't stop them, and I replied, "I think you could." That night, I placed the cufflinks in Henry's study drawer, locking it with a key only I held. The mansion was mine, but Henry's memory was my anchor. On starlight, under a quiet sky, I scattered his favorite roses into the sea, a final farewell. The waves carried them away, just as they'd carried me through this fight. I wasn't just Emily Carter, heir to a fortune. I was Henry's captain, standing tall, ready to write my own story. Standing on Starlight's deck, with Henry's roses drifting on the waves, I realized something profound. I'm Emily Carter, and my family's betrayal, stealing my $15 million inheritance, throwing me into the rain, wasn't the end. It was the forge that shaped me. Their lies, James's cruelty, Margaret's coldness, Sophia's silence, tried to break me, but they revealed my strength. Henry taught me to hold fast, not just to his fortune, but to my truth. He saw me when I was invisible, called me his captain, and in fighting for his legacy, I found my own. Betrayal hurts, a blade that cuts deep, but it's also a mirror, showing you who you are. I stood up, not for revenge, but for me, because I'm worth it, and so are you. Life will push you down, test you with storms, but those waves don't define you. Your choice to rise does. Henry's watch ticks on, reminding me every second is a chance to steer your own course. You don't need a mansion or millions to claim your place, just the courage to keep going. My story's one of resilience, of turning pain into power, but I know I'm not alone. You faced storms too, moments when you had to hold fast. What's your story of triumph? When did you stand up, not because it was easy, but because it was right? Share it below. I want to hear your voice, your truth. Subscribe to join this journey, where we celebrate not just surviving, but thriving. Let's write our stories together, one wave at a time, because like Henry said, the sea doesn't care who you are, it respects those who sail through.